When you think of a supernatural monster in an American horror film, what comes to mind? Michael Myers? Pennywise? Even Annabelle? Often their primary role is to be a terrifying force of evil, unexplained and thus serve to create scares and unique kills. But what if the monster wasn't just a monster? What if it were the ghost of a nation's trauma crawling out of your TV? What if it were a horde of zombies that, rather than simply craving to eat human brains, represent the societal greed and class struggles of a nation? This is exactly what Asian horror excels at. The creatures of the supernatural go beyond simple, one-dimensional villains, and are rather a representation of the traumatic past coupled with the present-day crisis. To understand many Asian horror films, it's important to know the history. In the late 20th century, Japan's lost decade saw severe economic stagnation, leading to a fear of losing human connection and a rise in social isolation. A decade later, South Korea struggled with its own economic crisis and governmental distrust. These anxieties set the stage for Hideo Nakata's Ringu and Yuan Sang-ho's Train to Busan. Both films use these events as an allegory for the society's anxieties, but they portray the issues differently. In Ringu, the present is haunted by an unhealed trauma from the past, causing modern alienation to surface. On the other hand, Train to Busan finds its horror not in history, but in the collapse of a corrupt modern society, with the zombie outbreak serving as a catalyst to reveal the sickness that plagues real-world South Koreans. Both films illustrate this transformation of technology into a horror element, but while Nakata uses sound design and mise-en-scène to portray personal trauma, Yuan uses setting and chaos to reveal systematic failures. To begin, I want to talk about the horror film Ringu from 1998, directed by Hideo Nakata. In this film, the character Sadako Yamamura, who haunts characters throughout the film, represents individual and familial trauma, and is an allegory for the dangers of spreading technology in the modern era and the overall corruption of the human body by the past. One source I found particularly intriguing was Colette Ballman's Inside the Well of Loneliness, towards the definition of the Japanese horror film. Throughout this article, Ballman argues that modern Japanese horror films, such as the Ringu trilogy, present overarching notions of isolation, alienation, and emptiness. More specifically, Ballman states that through the video virus, Sadako returns to wreak her dreadful revenge against the world of the living. This statement emphasizes that Sadako is not simply haunting random individuals, but rather is a direct result of her trauma, a lifetime of being feared and persecuted for her inherited psychic abilities, culminating in her being assaulted and thrown alive into a well to die in darkness and isolation. Nakata's choice of making isolation central to both her death and her curse is a specific directorial decision, as it serves two purposes. First, Nakata uses isolation to make Sadako's revenge thematic, as she forces her victims to experience the same solitude that created her. The second is that it functions as a critique of the social alienation in rapidly modernizing Japan. The horror of the film doesn't simply stem from the video, but from the act of watching it with very few people around, receiving the cursed phone call alone, and facing death by yourself. Moreover, Nakata uses modern technology with the videotape as a virus, being utilized to spread her pain, to create a representation of how the increased usage of technology is taking over people's lives. This is important because it represents Sadako as not simply a one-dimensional monster, but rather a tragic individual who seeks revenge. This furthers the idea that Asian horror utilizes the supernatural to represent trauma, as Sadako becomes a representation of how personal trauma affects the individual. Furthermore, this quote represents how the use of technology spreads like a virus, corrupting those who use it, thus creating more social isolation and an overall increase in modern anxiety. I also want to recognize Hideo Nakata's utilization of sound design and mise-en-scène to portray how technology has begun to invade the household and cause an increasing struggle in telling the difference between media and reality. For example, the scene where Sadako emerges from the television is a perfect allegory for past trauma intruding on the present. In this scene, Nakata uses mise-en-scène to transform a safe space into one of horror. The room is dark, lit only by the flickering TV, but the staging is what truly creates the horror, with Sadako's unnatural crawl through the screen to break the fourth wall, turning a household item into a portal for horror to literally invade the present. This feeling is amplified by the harsh static and scraping from the videotape, stripping away any comfort. Finally, Nakata uses point-of-view shots, putting us in the eyes of Ryuji, making us feel equally vulnerable. This private, haunting horror serves as a stark contrast to the public spectacle in Train to Busan. While Ringu uses the intimate technology of a household TV, Train to Busan increases scale, setting its horror within a high-speed train, a symbol of progress. Here, the technology of horror isn't a cursive videotape, but the train itself. Sang-ho uses its structure to represent modern capitalism. The physical division of each car becomes a metaphor for class divisions. Furthermore, the train's top speed signifies the powerful hurry-hurry mindset of a nation that continues to move, no matter the cost. In Ryan Gardner's article, Storming Off the Tracks, Zombies, High-Speed Rail, and South Korean Identity in Train to Busan, he notes that this mindset has bred indifference to safety, the underlying cause of the unending series of man-made disasters in Korea. This sentiment is further represented through the scene where Yeon Suk convinces everyone in the car not to let Suk-woo and his crew in, as they might have been infected. This moment serves as a reversal of Ringu's supernatural horror. If Sadako is a vengeful ghost representing the cruelty of society, Yeon Suk is its living, breathing actor, a human monster that does not require any supernatural reasoning. This moment serves as the film's central critique of society, demonstrating that the true villain is not the mindless zombie horde, but rather the conscious, selfish choices made by the humans. While the zombies are an external threat, they are a device to make the passengers face moral quandaries, choosing paranoia over compassion. The continuous acts of betrayal, whether done by Yun Suk, a rich COO, Suk Woo, the main character of the film, or the many other passengers on board, present the idea that the greatest horrors are born from our internal flaws that are nurtured and coalesced by the prioritization of personal survival over collective good. This furthers how Yuan utilizes ensemble staging and character conflict to depict the moral decay of society in times of distress and disaster. Thus, the technological setting of a fast-moving train represents how a nation's obsession with moving forward can trap its citizens in a structure that forces them to confront the reality that their own selfishness is a greater threat than any external monster. Overall, both directors use the supernatural as allegories for present-day anxieties, but their diagnosis of the problem is quite different. Ringu presents a haunting that stems from individual tragedy, demonstrating Japanese fears in the 1990s about technological innovation. Train to Busan, on the other hand, uses its setting to critique capitalism and the social division it causes. Ultimately, Ringu leaves us with the fear of ghosts that can travel through our technology to find us, whereas Train to Busan serves as a chilling reminder that the monsters were on the train with the rest of us all along.